This is one of the most powerful places in all of Scripture. This is the Holy of Holies of prophecy. This is unbelievable. That was a collection of just sort of visuals for you to see some of the visions that we're going to be dealing with that Daniel talks about and interprets for us. Last week we covered a little bit of one where Daniel is in the palace and he refuses to eat from the king's table. He gets all kinds of worried about whether or not, the guard is all kinds of worried about whether or not that's going to cost him his life, because Nebuchadnezzar is known for being cruel, and them refusing to eat the king's food might cause all kinds of problems if they end up being weak because they only want vegetables and water. But they end up being raised up into positions of power in the kingdom under Nebuchadnezzar because they ended up being wise, not eating the meat sacrificed to idols. But then in the second chapter, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream that he can't quite shake. It makes him terrified, and he calls all of the wise men in the palace and all of the wise men in Babylon to try to tell him what the dream is and to interpret it for him. None of the wise men can do this, and Nebuchadnezzar, who is the law of the land, whatever he says goes. If he makes a decision on a raw emotion, it just turns into law. So because nobody can tell Nebuchadnezzar what his dream is, he actually threatens to kill all of the wise men in Babylon. The big problem with that, outside of it being crazy, is that Daniel and his friends, the positions that they were raised into were people who were amongst the wise men. So Daniel hears about this coming slaughter that he's going to be a part of, and he says, hold on, why is the king being so touchy? Ask him if he'll give me some time. I think I can help him. So Daniel and his friends go and they pray together to see if they can receive the dream from the king and get an interpretation for the king so that he can save the lives of not only himself and his friends, but of all of the wise men in Babylon. He gets from God, after that prayer, the vision and the interpretation of it. And so he goes before Nebuchadnezzar and he tells him the interpretation of the dream. That's where we're picking up in chapter 2. This dream sets the stage for all of the prophecy in Daniel. So, verse 36 says, "This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold." So this statue is made of 4 metals, this image that the Nebuchadnezzar had is a statue of four metals like that in the video. The head of gold, chest and arms of silver, torso and thighs of bronze, and then legs of iron. And then at the very bottom, his feet and the toes are mixed with iron and clay. So Daniel says, oh, God has really blessed you, and he's given you all this power and this kingdom, and you're a ruler unlike any other. You are the head of gold. And so right now, that's good news. But Daniel is about to give Nebuchadnezzar the bad news. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it. Just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, and as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out from the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So Daniel says, here's your dream. You saw a statue. The head was made of gold, the chest and arms were of silver, the abdomen and thighs were of bronze, and the legs were of clay. And then down at the bottom, there were feet with 10 toes, and the toes were mixed partly of iron and partly clay. They're strong but fragile and weak. And then all of a sudden, you saw a mountain, and from that mountain, a stone was cut, but not from hands, not from human anything. And that stone came barreling down towards the statue and toppled it all. He goes on to tell Nebuchadnezzar that Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, the kingdom he created, is the kingdom of gold. But there are kingdoms that are coming after it to rule the world. So Daniel is telling Nebuchadnezzar that all of his strength and all of his hope in building a kingdom that would endure is not going to happen. You think that you're like God on earth and your kingdom is going to last forever and it's going to rule through all of your descendants, but God has another plan. There will be a kingdom who takes you over. And here's the worst news, that kingdom won't be as strong as yours. But they're still going to do it. And then another kingdom after that, and another kingdom after that. And then at the end, there will be this weird kingdom that in the days of those kings, so more than one, which is likely reference to the toes, or 10, that in the days of those kings, there will be this stone that comes, the rock that comes, and destroys all of the effort of human government and trying to rule the world. And he sets up his kingdom to endure forever. So really, it's Babylon is followed by the Medo-Persian Empire. The Persians take over the Babylonians. We see that in the book of Daniel. Then after that, the Greeks come and take over the Persians. And then the Romans take over from there. And yet that kingdom is never really defeated. The Roman Empire, it never lost. It just sort of fizzled out. And there's some sort of weird connection that's always existed in Europe. And at some point, there will be some sort of conglomeration that's similar to the Roman Empire, but without as much power, that will be divided into maybe 10 different zones or something like that. But in the days of those kings, Jesus is coming back. And when he comes back, he's destroying human government and he's setting up his throne in Jerusalem, and his kingdom will endure forever. That's ultimately the idea behind this vision and its interpretation. And Daniel says, this dream is certain, its interpretation is sure. And while part of it is yet to come, the feat of iron and clay and the return of Christ to set up his kingdom permanently, The rest of it has happened pretty clearly. The Medes and Persians took over Babylon. The Greeks took over the Persians. And then the Romans took over all of that land and were never defeated. They just fizzled out. So Daniel, from this, actually earns an even higher place in the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar respects this, but in the next chapter, Nebuchadnezzar defies Daniel's vision and the interpretation, and he builds a statue that's 90 feet high, made of pure gold, as if to say to God, who are you to tell me what my future is? I say my kingdom lasts forever. And then there's the whole, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown in the fire for not bowing down to the statue. And Nebuchadnezzar, in chapter 4, opens up with Nebuchadnezzar addressing the nation. Now, when he tried to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, he realized, or he found out, that God is the one true God, and he is more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar. And all Nebuchadnezzar failed or managed to do by throwing them in the fire was to burn the ropes that he bound them with and kill his own captains and service members. So Nebuchadnezzar lost that battle. But in chapter 4, we find out that he has hubris again. He's addressing the nation after a crazy time in his life. See, Nebuchadnezzar had a vision that Daniel interpreted for him. The vision was of a crazy tree that was huge and bold, and there were animals nesting under it. And then all of a sudden, the tree was destroyed. And Daniel gives the interpretation of that dream, and then the interpretation happens to Nebuchadnezzar. But chapter 4 is Nebuchadnezzar recounting all of this as past, because he's beyond the vision and its interpretation, and he's actually humbling himself before God. So let's see what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. In chapter 4, verse 20, it says, the tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and its fruit abundant, and which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and whose branches is the birds of heaven had their home. It's you, O king, who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, your dominion to the ends of the earth. He's saying, Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom is huge, it's glorious, it's rich, it's wealthy. God has really blessed this, but you're a problem. He finds out in verse 23. Inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it. Remember, the tree is Nebuchadnezzar. But leave its stump and its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him gaze with the beasts of the field till 7 times pass over him. So apparently there's going to be some sort of 7-year period where Nebuchadnezzar gets lost in the wilderness, and his power is cut down. Daniel says, this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon you, my lord the king. They shall drive you from your men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he chooses. And inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins, being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. So Daniel says, this tree, that it's rich and wealthy and wonderful, and all have come to nest under it. The kingdom of Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar's rule has grown, and it's filled with gold, and the agriculture is amazing from the Mesopotamian Fertile Crescent, and everything's going really well. But Nebuchadnezzar's pride keeps coming back. God keeps proving to Nebuchadnezzar that God is the one true God, and Daniel's God is more powerful than him. Yet Nebuchadnezzar's pride keeps swelling up. So Daniel says a watcher or an angelic being is going to cut down your tree, cut down your rule. And you're going to live with the beasts of the field, and you're going to live and act like a beast, which Nebuchadnezzar does. He goes crazy at some point during his rule for 7 years. And he lives out in the wilderness, and his nails grow long and his hair grows long, and he looks like a beast. until he comes to his senses and he humbles himself before God. And that Daniel's vision comes true. And chapter 4 is Nebuchadnezzar's farewell address to the nation, saying, I've finally been humbled. I need all of Babylon to learn the lesson. Daniel's God, Yahweh, is the one true God. You should all worship him. And so after Nebuchadnezzar's cruelty, destroying Jerusalem, destroying the temple, enslaving the people, or making them servants in Babylon, his cruelty and murderous behavior, his actions at a whim, his constant pride swelling up, and his defiance of God and God's word, in the end, Nebuchadnezzar was humbled, and it's heavily likely we'll see him in heaven. Because anyone has the chance. God's forgiveness and mercy and compassion know no boundaries. All you have to do is humble yourself before him and recognize that he's the one who carries righteousness. You can't do it without him. Nebuchadnezzar does, and that's how he walks away. But he leaves the kingdom in the hands of his son, and his son lets his grandson rule alongside him, Belshazzar. And there's a whole thing that happens with handwriting on the wall that we talked about last week. But ultimately, there's another vision that Daniel has while Belshazzar is king before the Persians take over Babylon. And that is in Daniel chapter 7. So there's a few things we're going to look at in Daniel chapter 7. The first one is verses 13 and 14. These are visions that Daniel is having. It says, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Now remember, in the vision of the statue, there's a stone that's uncut from human hands that comes and destroys all human government and rules and reigns forever. This isn't expounding on that vision. He is one like the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, and he came to the Ancient of Days. Well, the Son of Man is next to the Ancient of Days, but the Son of Man is given dominion and glory, and all peoples, nations, and languages will serve him. He has an everlasting dominion which won't pass away, and his kingdom is one that won't be destroyed. So he's Yahweh, but he's next to Yahweh, but there's only one Yahweh, because it's the Father and the Son. And Jesus quotes this when he's in his trial before the Sanhedrin, before the cross. When they ask him if he truly is the Messiah, and he responds, I tell you the truth, you'll see one like the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. Jesus quotes this because he's saying, that's me. He is God coming on the clouds of heaven to set up an eternal kingdom, who will receive glory and worship and service that are only due to Yahweh, because he is Yahweh. But one God in three persons. He is God the Son. And so there's Jesus in the Old Testament if you're looking for him. He's the uncut stone not cut from human hands that comes and destroys all human kingdoms. He's the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, who will set up his eternal kingdom and get the worship that belongs to Yahweh, because he is God. But it continues as he has even more in-depth vision. He has visions of four beasts. It says, starting in verse 17 of chapter 7, those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with teeth of iron and nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet. And the 10 horns that were on top of its head, and the other horn which came up before the tree fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, which appearance was greater than the fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. The time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom, which shall be different from all the other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, much like the 10 toes, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and he shall subdue 3 of the kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and the law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, and times, and half a time, or a year, or a year, 2 years, and half a year, or 3.5 years. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion, the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his all dominion shall serve and obey him. So, the vision that Daniel has is of 4 different beasts. One is a lion with wings, but it has its wings clipped, and it stands up on its feet like a man at the end. Well, that's Nebuchadnezzar. It's not even prophetic. It happens, it just gives us a way to interpret the rest of the prophecy. Because Daniel lived at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Lions were connected to Babylon, and so were eagle's wings because of all of the art and architecture in Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar literally crawled around like a beast until he humbled himself before God and stood up and had his wings clipped. So that's Nebuchadnezzar. But the second beast is a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. Well, the bear represents Persia and also has one shoulder lifted up another. Well, the interesting thing about the Medo-Persian Empire is that when Cyrus took the position of king, he was a Persian, and he raised the Persians up above the Medes, where the Medes used to be the higher kingdom in that partnership. So he rose the Persians up above, and they swallowed up Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. Those are the 3 ribs in the bear's mouth. And they conquered all of those lands. And then the next one is a leopard that has 4 wings and 4 heads. Well, that's Alexander the Great in the Grecian kingdom. Alexander the Great came and conquered the Persians, but when Alexander the Great died, he divided his kingdom, or his kingdom ended up being divided amongst 4 of his generals. And then, of course, Rome, the Iron Kingdom that was never defeated. But somehow, in the future, out of that conglomeration, there will be 10 kings, and out of those 10 kings, one will rise up, a little horn, which always means political or military power, will rise up, and he'll swallow up or subdue 3 of the other kings, and he'll come and try to rule the world. But at that point, the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. So Jesus comes back, and he doesn't get what he wants, and Jesus rules and reigns. So constantly, the picture is always, yes, there's trouble coming. There's a ruler coming. There's some conglomeration of some beastly world system that is odious to God. But Jesus is coming back. So we all have hope. And if you notice, the 4 kings, the 4 kingdoms, or the beasts, are similar to the 4 metals. But in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, from man's perspective, it's a beautiful statue made of precious metals. Man's kingdoms are willingness to govern and create and rule over others. But from God's perspective, when he's giving Daniel the vision, it's odious, ugly, disgusting beasts that he's going to come and destroy and create the true government where Jesus rules and reigns from Jerusalem. And that's what we have to hope for. Now in Daniel 8, we get more specific about Persia and Greece. So let's start in verse 16. It says, I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So Daniel's had another vision. Gabriel's going to help him understand it. He came near where I stood. When he came, and I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me, and I stood me upright. He said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. For at the appointed time, the end shall be. The ram, which you saw having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. So again, the Medes and the Persians are going to take over Babylon. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So Greece is going to take over Persia in the future from Daniel's perspective. And there's one king that's really great that comes from them, Alexander the Great. As for the broken horn and the four that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So he's literally saying Persia is going to take over Babylon, and then Greece is going to take over Persia. But then the great king of Greece is going to die, and in his place, 4 smaller rulers shall arise, but they won't have as much power as the first one. It's exactly what happened. Alexander the Great dies, his kingdom gets divided among 4 of his generals. They don't have the same power. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule. He shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes. He shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So out of that Grecian kingdom, when it gets broken into 4 kingdoms, out of one of those 4 kingdoms is going to come some king who's really the worst. In fact, his name is Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV. When he comes to rule out of the Seleucid Empire, he mistreats the Jewish people. He enslaves many of them. He murders hundreds or thousands of them. He slaughters a pig on the bronze altar outside the temple, and then forces the Jews to eat the unkosher and unclean meat. He erects a statue of Zeus in the holy place in the temple, but the statue of Zeus has a carving of a face that looks like Antiochus, because he basically views himself as God on earth. He does that to the people, and it's referred to as the abomination of desolation in ancient history. So that's the guy who's coming, but then it says here at the end that much like Antiochus, who is described here, he shall even arise against the prince of princes. Well, this is about the end. So Antiochus Epiphanes is a near fulfillment of an ultimate fulfillment that's going to happen later on. So Antiochus is the diagram or the foreshadowing of what the ultimate final Antichrist will look like, is what Daniel is telling us here. Or what Gabriel is telling Daniel, and we're getting that news from him. We're going to move on to Daniel chapter 9. In Daniel chapter 9, he prays for most of the chapter. And he's praying for the people to return to Jerusalem. But at the very end of the chapter, he gets another vision, an important vision. And if you want to know about Jesus in the Old Testament, this is one of the most powerful places in all of Scripture. This is the Holy of Holies of prophecy. This is unbelievable. If you haven't heard this before, and even if you have, it should still blow your mind. In Daniel chapter 24, it says 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring an everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Notice there are 6 things, but they're very similar. The first 3 and the second 3 are similar things. The first 3 are to finish transgression, to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity. Basically, for sin and transgression and for everything that we violated God with, there will be some sort of, something is coming to deal with that. And then the second 3 are to bring in everlasting righteousness, a forever kingdom that serves God, to seal up vision and prophecy, to fulfill all of God's word, and to anoint the most holy. So all of this is about the very end. So there's 2 separate things. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince. So Daniel is saying, okay, there's going to be a command from some king in the future to rebuild Jerusalem. Remember, Daniel's in Babylon because Jerusalem and the temple have been destroyed. And he's saying, there will be a command to rebuild Jerusalem. And now I'm going to give you the time frame from that command to when the Messiah will show up. There shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. Now he's been really specific. The streets and the wall are going to be rebuilt. That's the command you're looking for. When that command takes place, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 7-year periods, meaning 69 7-year periods, or 480 years. The math is good. Sir Robert Anderson has written a whole book about this called The Coming Prince, where he's dug into all of this. So there's 480 years from the time that a king in the future will tell the people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Well, we see that in the book of Nehemiah. King Artaxerxes allows Nehemiah to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. And according to Sir Robert Anderson, that's around March 14th, 445 BC. And he counted out the days for 480 Jewish and Babylonian years later, because they used a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar. So that's 173,880 days. So from the decree to rebuild the wall, which Daniel predicted, and it happened almost 100 years later, that decree is written in Nehemiah. 173,880 days later is April 26th, 32 AD, also known as Palm Sunday. The day Jesus rides into the donkey, into Jerusalem, to present himself as the Passover Lamb, and the people accept him into the city, where a week later they crucify him. Daniel said, I'm telling you, in 480 years from this decree, Messiah is coming. And what is Messiah going to do? To end transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity. Jesus came to do those exact things. And it says here, after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off. How does he make an end to transgressions? By dying on the cross. Being cut off means being cut off from life. Daniel said, I'm predicting the time the Messiah is coming, and the Messiah is coming to die, to end transgression, to appease God for the iniquity, for our iniquity. That's what Jesus did on the cross. Then he says, there shall be 7 weeks, until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, and the streets will be built again. After 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then, Daniel says, after the Messiah has been killed, then he's fulfilled his role in finishing transgression, covering for our iniquity. The people of the prince who is to come, meaning the people of the Antichrist who is to come. So, members of the Roman army, meaning that the future Antichrist is likely to come from the Roman Empire. The people of him who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, in 70 AD, 37 years after Jesus rose from the grave, they destroy Jerusalem and the temple and the city, and the people are kicked out of Jerusalem. That's what's predicted here in Daniel. It's exactly what happens. Then, after that happens, he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and an offering. On the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So, after the temple is destroyed by the people of the prince who is to come, by the people of the Antichrist, in the future, he'll make a covenant with them, but he'll break that covenant, and there will be an abomination of desolation, which must take place in the temple. But the temple's already been destroyed, which is why you'll hear a lot of people expecting there to be another temple built in the future for the Antichrist to desecrate. Now, we don't have a lot of time. Here's the breakdown. Daniel chapter 10, a supernatural messenger comes to give Daniel another vision. We get that vision in chapters 11 and 12. Chapter 11 is the most prophecy-ridden chapter of all of the Bible. So I'm not going over it now, but there are sermons on the website and lessons on the website and app if you want to find that and go verse by verse, really in depth. But essentially, it gives a whole overview of what happens in the intertestamental period. Basically, the 400 years between Malachi and Jesus. All right. What it basically says is Persia will be taken over by Greece. Greece will be taken over by Rome. But during the Grecian kingdom, there will be 4 kings that arise after Alexander the Great dies. Of those 4 kingdoms, 2 of them basically war over each other. That's the kingdom that rules over Egypt and the kingdom that rules over Syria. In between is Israel and Jerusalem. And they war over each other, trying to take land, and Israel's kind of caught in the middle of it. Out of that war, 1 king will arise that happens to be Antiochus Epiphanes, and it goes into all that he's going to do. And it points out that he's a foreshadowing of the Antichrist, and you get more details of that in chapter 12. And ultimately, Daniel ends up feeling kind of queasy by the end of it all. And there's no wonder why. He doesn't understand it, but he's been given the mission to give this vision to those who will understand it later. In all of this vision in Daniel, the theme is pretty similar. There's a coming kingdom in which a future Antichrist will rule over the final Antichrist, who looks a lot like Antiochus. There will be some sort of abomination of desolation. There will be 7 years of rule. And at the end of it all, Jesus comes back and he sets up an eternal kingdom. And even though trouble is coming, Jesus is coming back, Jesus has won. And in the midst of that, you get Daniel chapter 9 talking about Jesus' first coming and what he came to do. And that is Jesus in the Old Testament. Jot that down.